Why didn't she report it sooner? Why didn't she leave? He doesn't seem like the type. These are questions asked in an attempt to grasp such an uncomfortable topic. But notice who they're directed towards. Instead of asking why the perpetrator chose to commit the assault, we focus in on the survivor's experience and the circumstances they were in. The World Health Organization shares that 1 in 3 women and girls, around 840 million people, experience some kind of sexual violence in their lifetime. This topic is important to me, and I hope that I can encourage all of us to rethink the way we talk about sexual abuse, assault, and harassment. Instead of dialing in on the survivor's experience, why don't we ask what messages, attitudes, and social norms allow the perpetrators to believe these actions were acceptable in the first place? Victim blaming surrounding sexual violence is a global issue that shifts responsibility onto survivors, and communities can help reduce this harm by challenging victim blaming dialogue and promoting social norm change. Before we jump into solutions, we need to understand what victim blaming is, why it's a difficult topic, and why it's so hard to recognize. In 2018, the U.S. Senate Committee on the Judiciary saw Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh facing sexual assault allegations and charges from Dr. Christine Ford. Public attention shifted towards Ford's credibility, memory, and decisions, while Kavanaugh emphasized the impact of these allegations on his reputation, future, and family. This case reflects the American Psychological Association's definition of victim blaming, placing responsibility onto the victim rather than those who caused it. Although this example unfolded on a national stage, it is not limited to only high-profile cases. These same attitudes and environments can be fostered within families and friends. The CDC in 2022 shares that 56% of perpetrators were acquaintances, 39% being intimate partners, 12% being strangers. When perpetrators are someone people or family know, familiarity makes accountability more difficult and increases victim-blaming environments. Therapy, hotlines, and support services emphasizes after sexual assault has happened and acknowledged do exist, and while these resources are essential, they don't examine the behaviors, beliefs, or social conditions that led to this harm in the first place. Victim blaming creates barriers that prevent access to these very resources. So to understand this from a clinical perspective, I interviewed licensed marriage and family therapist Genesis Montalegre, who practices in La Puente and meets with clients all across the board. She explains that victim blaming can become internalized, and survivors can believe they could have prevented what happened to them. When responsibility shifts, survivors struggle to recognize the need for support. And when survivors are, quote, minimized or questioned, they can, quote, question and deny it for themselves, proving that a culture of victim blaming creates these barriers. And when survivors are met with, quote, dismissiveness, avoidance, or shaming by family and friends, trusted people, these responses can deepen trauma and inflict deeper harm than what it was initially caused by the assault. These issues aren't distant, and therapists like Genesis Montalegre and many others in California work to address this problem every day. Yet, because of a victim culture, healing becomes difficult. Victim blaming is reinforced in our conversations. Dialogue has the same power and is the most effective place to begin to make change. Let's consider how society talks about sexual assault in social media, news platforms, pornography, movies, documentaries, and public discussions. When ideas about what the victim wore, drank, remembered, or their overall predispositions, those ideas are repeated and reinforced into social norms. But what if we factor in the items of consent, accountability, and choices of the perpetrator? In 2026, Kodo made a social norm-based surveying college students after they viewed Instagram reels about sexual violence and education. These repeated messages helped shape bystander intervention and fostered appropriate responses. Now, let's vision 2 different conversations. A victim comes forward and they're immediately met with doubt, questioning, and speculation. Their need to defend their experience arises. And on the other hand, a victim comes forward and their experience is recognized rather than questioned. Their path to healing is a lot more easier. Now, I want us all to be able to recognize and redirect victim blaming when it happens. The California Department of Public Health and rape prevention and education programs aim to shift community attitudes. And this is a realistic solution because communication and conversations happen all the time. Humans are a social creature, and we need to talk to other people to be able to function in our daily lives. So when you hear victim-blaming dialogue in maybe family reunions or when you're hanging out with your bros or going to coffee shops, it's important that you challenge it instead of letting it pass by. So an example I brought up in the very beginning was, why didn't she just leave? You can intervene and say things like, what barriers might make leaving difficult and what support does she need now? Or another example, why didn't he fight back? Phrases like this can be replaced with, why are we judging a survivor's response instead of focusing on the person who caused the harm? And lastly, when someone says, why didn't they report it sooner? We can intervene and say, what factors might have made reporting feel unsafe or difficult? And the answer to that very question of delayed reporting can be very much the fact that victim blaming culture still exists. Thank you.